Today is Friday, February 16th, 2018. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. We're interviewing Thomas E. Valentino, a Navy veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Tom, for your service and for being willing to participate in our project today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really honored to be considered for this testimonial.
Thank you. The honor is all ours, believe me, really. Thank you. So, Tom, where and when were you born?
I was born December 28, 1942.
And who were your parents, and what were their names and occupations?
My mother was Anna Rollo Valentino, and my father was Eric Thomas Valentino. He was worked for the Navy Yard as a welder, and my mother was a housekeeper.
Okay. And did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have 3 sisters, the oldest being Jeannie Racklin.
Oh, pretty name.
And the next oldest would be Patricia Kennedy, and the youngest would be Joanne Valentino.
And where are you in the mix?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest.
Yes.
Okay. So, were any of them, have they served in the military?
No, they haven't.
Okay. So what were you doing before you entered the service?
I worked for American Airlines in the freight department.
Oh, wow. Was that right after high school, or you went to college first?
No, I went to college.
Oh, where did you go?
I went to the College of Aeronautics in LaGuardia, Flushing, New York.
How long, was that a bachelor's degree?
That
or?
was actually was a 2.5-year college condensed in 2.5 years. I started out full-time, and I went to part-time because I was paying for myself and I couldn't afford it. So
wow.
I went part-time, and but because of money and commitments, I wasn't able to graduate. It was a very difficult school to graduate, you know, and it was an engineering degree.
Oh, I
and
see.
a lot of students confuse it with being a mechanic
Right.
for the airline, and this wasn't geared for that.
So you got a job with the education you had gotten, you got a good job out of it.
Well, not really. I had an engineering job with General Bronze in Garden City, and I was an engineering aide,
Okay.
and it had nothing to do with the field.
Oh.
They built all these skyscraper in the windows in Manhattan.
Oh, I see. It wasn't an aeronautics firm.
No, it wasn't. So I was the engineering aide for the engineer of the plant.
Okay. So did you, which branch of the military were you?
I was the Navy,
Navy.
Seabees.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
So why did you choose that specific branch of the military?
Well, I had a good friend with the airlines, and he was already in the Navy, and he talked me into joining, and it was because of him that I joined.
Now, when you join the Navy, you don't pick the Seabees. They kind of pick you, right? Or no? How's that work?
Well,
What's the difference? What are the Seabees?
the Seabees are an engineering force.
Okay.
The construction force of the Navy.
Okay.
The Navy is strictly, mostly sea and land, but we get battlefields ready for troops and for landing aircraft.
I see.
But it's an engineering. We construct buildings and
Anything
piers.
they need, yeah.
So It's a very hard field to get in now. It's the billets are very low, and but I was recruited as a CB, and my friend was also actually my friend that convinced me to join was a Navy, strictly Navy, but. I was signed up as a CB
You
versus.
did. When you enlisted in the Navy?
I enlisted
And
in the
then
Seabees.
You can do that?
Yes.
You can pick that? Okay.
Yeah, as long as there's a billet
I see.
at available openings and they need manpower.
And what year was that when you enlisted?
That was somewhere in the fall of 1980.
Okay. Now, what happened when you departed for training camp in your early days of training?
Well, when I joined, it was very much different than the Army and the Air Force and the Marines. They have what they call the APG program.
Oh.
And that's called APG, stands for Advanced Pay Grade.
Ah.
So they would advance your rank, and you had 2 years to prove yourself and pass tests. And if you didn't pass the test and complete the training as they wanted to, you would be knocked down to a seaman. So advanced pay grade is, I started off as a petty officer for the third class. And the big difference is there was no boot camp for advanced pay grade.
Oh.
You went to management school. It was mostly classroom. They took you out maybe for a half hour each day and
For exercises or something?
exercises and, how to march.
Did you have to learn weaponry and things like that?
Oh, yes.
I guess everyone has to.
We did that. It was, most of that was, as you started off, was in classroom. But then, every year, you spend 2 weeks active in different locations, training in different parts of the Navy or the Seabees.
Oh, I see.
And then
But you were active when you went in, when you enlisted. You weren't reserve.
No, I was reserve.
Oh.
I wasn't active.
Oh.
I went in as a reservist.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Okay. And then you also have your drill status, where once a month you drilled on a weekend at a particular location, and you got trained on in classrooms or whatever they had,
Right.
which would be the plan of the month, they called, and you get advance notice where you had to drill and what the plan of the day was or the weekend.
Okay. So was there any time during your service, so you spent 20 years in, right? Or
Yes.
that you were active duty?
Yes. Well, in 1990, we were the first Seabees to get activated to active duty by the President Bush. And so, and this was in Operation Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And I was activated to go to Iraq. And we were sent to Gulfport, Mississippi for a preparation for training to go to Iraq. And there was a lot going on with, as we there were airstrikes and bombings, and they were threatening us with gas. So we had to train in the gas.
Oh, wow. This was in Mississippi?
This was in Gulfport, Mississippi.
Okay.
We got trained to handle gas in a gas chamber. And it came a point in time that we were to leave for Iraq that one morning after about 2 or 3 weeks, and we met out by the colonel of the Marines, and he gave us, well, it's disappointing news and good news. For a lot of us, we trained and we were looking to do our job with the armed forces in a war. But on the other hand, the good news is the plane was sitting there to board us.
Oh.
And President Bush had canceled it. The war was officially over.
No kidding.
And
Wow.
so they stopped us being transported to Iraq. And
That was pretty close.
yeah, so they said, consider you did your job, whether you went there or you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But the good news is you're not going on this aircraft this morning.
Wow. Wow. How
So
long had you been training in Mississippi for that?
a little over 2 weeks.
Really?
They gave you all your gear, your desert gear, and
Really?
your gas mask and all of that. And I still have all this stuff. They give it to you to keep.
Oh, okay. Well, that's amazing. So let's go back a minute. I'm sorry, I jumped the gun, but do you remember when your instructors for basic training going? Where was your training
My
again?
basic training was in Gulfport, Mississippi.
In the beginning.
It was in New Orleans, but it was in Gulfport.
You remember
in
your
the-
instructors there, and what were they like?
We had, well, we all had basically 3 instructors. There was a chief. I do have his name, but
That's okay.
it was roughly Guthrie or something like that. Gutierrez was another one. And I'm not accurate on
That's fine.
telling you who
That's
they
fine. What
who
was
they
the
were.
training like? What were their?
The
what were
training
they
was
like?
was
Yeah.
all classroom,
Uh-huh.
and
Oh, that's right. You said. Yeah.
yeah,
Did you get any specialized training while you were there,
uh,
or after you went to specialized training?
no, it was basically management school,
Okay.
teaching you the history of the Navy,
Ah,
not Seabees, but the history of the Navy,
okay.
and the fundamentals of being in the military, and teaching you how to react in war and the structure of the Navy, from the president on down, and you had to be able to do mathematical situations, how to figure out. It's hard to explain.
Well, you were eventually building and constructing and organizing.
No, well, not in management training.
Oh.
This training was strictly all Navy, telling you about the Navy.
Oh, okay.
And
But for the Seabees.
the Seabees, we did have training, and that was ongoing as we went to our active duty once a year for 2 weeks,
Ah.
and every weekend. That's where we got the training, our average training, what we needed to do
For the Seabees.
for the Seabees.
What kind of projects did you learn to
Well,
build? Or?
my rate was a heavy equipment operator. They gave you a rate based on what experience you had in private life.
Ah.
Almost like that movie with John Wayne. They brought the trade from the outside, and they individualized what your expertise was in real life, whether you were an electrician or a plumber or you drove a bulldozer. So
So your experience after college was probably helpful
yeah,
because it was involved in some engineering type.
yeah,
So
yeah.
did that come in handy when
It came in handy, but I worked for the airline, and I was an instructor as a collateral duty for American. I worked for American Airlines,
Oh.
so they instituted a tractor-trailer operation, and they needed people that had that were tested to do tractor-trailer and drive, and they picked the most eligible, people to be able to handle a trailer, and they would test you on it and give you a road test. And
This was in the Navy or the
no,
airlines?
this was in the airlines, and they picked about, out of a whole fleet of workers that worked for Kennedy Airport, there was only about 4 of us
Oh, wow.
that were picked to do the training
Okay.
and train all the people that wanted to get trained.
Uh-huh.
And so that's where I got my my basic Seabee training
Oh, okay.
with heavy equipment, because that included tractor trailer.
I see.
Of course, once we were a Seabee, as the years went on, we got trained in different segments of the Seabees, where you would drive a bulldozer or a front-end loader or an excavator or,
You learned it all. Wow.
yeah. But you didn't always stay with what you were trained for. You were utilized to work and help put up a building.
Whatever they needed.
Yeah, and you learned. You learned from experience of working with people that do this.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. How was it adapting to the military life? Did you live, this was during the training, I guess? You lived on base?
For the most part, Floyd Bennett Field was our home for our records, and that was in Brooklyn. And then when we went to Peekskill, that was more of a training for the Seabees, where they had the equipment to get trained on, such as a crane, a bulldozer, whatever.
Wow.
So that's where we got the actual hands-on training.
How long were you there?
Well, we went once a month,
Oh, I see, yeah.
or sometimes we would spend 2 weeks there. But for the most part, we got sent in different locations around the world to do projects and to get involved in preparation for a possible
Deployment or?
deployment.
So where else were you sent?
Well, I was sent to Gitmo, Cuba, and we did some. We had many projects there. We did. We put up buildings. We put up. I'm trying to think what it was. It's like a recreational
Okay.
covering when you had a picnic, a gazebo, right?
Okay.
It was like gazebos. But my particular project that I worked on was actually on the water. We were building concrete piers,
Oh, wow.
so
For
boats
what?
could come in.
Oh, I see, for boats coming in.
Yeah.
So how long was this one of the 2-week stints?
This
or-
was one of the 2-week things.
Wow.
And
Do you finish a project in that time?
actually, most of them were completed. The only thing we couldn't finish was the piers, because of the rough waters. They had to scrap the operation
Oh,
because we worked on rafts.
oh, wow, gee.
It's a very unique
Yeah.
way that the piers are built, and I won't get into it because we'll take too much time.
Wow, did you feel comfortable on those things? Was it safe?
Actually, I was, my job was to work on the land part, getting the piers ready,
Oh, okay.
constructing. We're working with cement and that stuff, and
How many guys do you think, how many service people would work on a project at any one time? Like with you?
Maybe 15, 20.
Oh, really? That
Yeah.
many? So when you were there for 2 weeks at a time, how was it with the food and where did you sleep? You had barracks or?
Well, we didn't have, they actually had like dormitories, similar, that we went to, and they had,
How many guys in one?
usually, there was
Building.
two guys to a room, and
Oh.
the whole detachment was in the one building.
Oh, okay. So how many was in that usually? About?
I would say somewhere around 50.
Okay. And then you all ate together in a mess hall?
Well, we either went to the mess hall or it depends what part of the day. In the morning, we ate in the mess hall. In the afternoon, we took a ferry to an island where the Marines are based.
Oh.
And they had probably the best food.
Really? Why did you go there?
We didn't have to go there. It was your choice
Oh.
either to go there or stay on the mainland
Oh, I see.
and eat.
But it was, so it was for the eating part, it wasn't?
Yeah.
You weren't building there or
No, we weren't.
helping the Marines or anything?
No.
Okay. So in addition to Gitmo, where else were you sent?
We went to Rota, Spain, and I would say there was about maybe 15 people that were chosen to go to Rota, Spain.
Oh, so you don't volunteer, they tell you?
Yeah. Well, they give you an option. They have different locations that they have in these overseas or wherever you have to go. And you give a choice where you want to go, but you don't always get to choose or get chosen to go there.
Right, okay.
It depends on your experience of what you can do. So, but I got chosen to go to this particular place, and I had some background experience. So what they were actually doing is they were working on a men's and a girls' or men's and women's gym
Oh.
where they're putting in bathrooms, and they were doing tile work. Okay. And that's basically what we did
Oh, wow.
for this detachment in Rota, Spain.
You know, I never realized that the military, at least the Navy, I guess, would use naval personnel or Seabees to do that. They don't use outside laymen to construct things.
No,
The military would have their own personnel do it. I
Right.
guess that's safer.
the only exception would be the Army, where they have the Army Corps of Engineers.
Which, well, is that technically a
Well,
branch? Sort of.
they get more into engineering than the Seabees, but
They're
a
military
lot of
still.
our officers are engineers.
Oh, I see.
It's just that we do the work and they supervise.
Right. But you're technically a Navy person.
Yes, Royal Navy.
All
Yeah.
Navy. What kind of friendships and camaraderie did you form while you were in? Did you keep in touch with anyone?
Yeah, we were a very close-knit
Yeah.
family there,
Nice.
you know, and
When your time came to go again each year, you didn't serve with the same people necessarily.
most of the time you did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, the same people would, you know, the Seabees were a type of outfit that they made more of a career out of it than the Navy.
Oh.
The Navy would do their 4 years. The Navy basically is 4 years, and the Army is 2 years.
Okay.
But if you were a Navy person, you went aboard a ship and you went away for 6 months and whatever. So, and when their 4 years was up, they, you know,
Done.
they were discharged, and some of them stayed on. But mostly the Seabees are the ones that kept on
Re-upping?
being, you know, joining up for an additional time. And there was also incentives for
Signing up again?
For signing up, where you would get bonus money.
Oh, okay. So how
But-
long did you stay in?
Well, a total of 20 years.
10 years. That's great. Wow, thank you for that.
Yes.
Amazing. What did you, when you were there for 2 weeks at a crack, right?
Yes.
You don't have off-duty time. You're working the whole time?
No, it's usually 8 to 10 hours.
A day?
Depending on the product, yeah. Sometimes we'd work under floodlights
Oh, at night?
to get something finished, depending on what it was. If we're working on concrete, you have to finish leveling the concrete, and sometimes you needed floodlights to finish, because you can't finish concrete unless it's finished.
Right, it has to be, you have to.
Yeah,
do
it's got to be covered for curing and
Now, how did you do that with, where were you working during that time as a civilian? For the airlines?
I was still with the airlines, yes.
So did they, I guess, are they obligated to give you the 2 weeks or off? Every year? How does that work?
We're obligated to do our 2 weeks.
Okay, right.
It could vary according to your job. You do have, your main thing is your family and your job.
Right.
And so when they gave you options where to go, they would have specific times where that detachment was going. So they would have them in January all the way to any part of the year.
But did the airlines they obviously held your job?
Well, they have to.
They have to.
It's a federal ruling.
Okay. Now, tell me about some of the amazing letters you got for accommodations and things like that. And from the president, because of you were participating in different activities. Wow, how did that work?
Well,
Where were those and what did you do?
if I want to go back, actually before Desert Storm, actually it was being activated for Desert Storm that I was in Gulfport, and I sat down one day to write a letter to the President Bush,
Senior.
the senior. And I don't remember the contents of the letter.
Why did you want to do that?
Well, I just felt, other than write to my wife, I figured since he's the chief,
Or were you
commander-in-chief, I thought it would be good to let him know how everything was going with the war and all that. And
Where were you stationed?
I was stationed in Gulfport, Mississippi.
Okay.
Well, yeah, very close to New Orleans. And so I wrote him, and several months later, I got a response from the White House.
That's great.
Giving me a letter of thanking me for writing and for my service.
Nice. So you explained to him what was going on the
Yes.
base, or what?
I would, so much I didn't want to just thanking the president for his support and how things were going, and basically it wasn't a long letter.
That's nice, and that he answered you so nicely.
Yes.
Good. When you would come back from your service, how were you received by family and friends?
Extremely well. I was flabbergasted as to the response we got from both. I lived in Suffolk County, but I also got a good reception from Nassau County,
Nice.
from county executives, with a hometown parade and a big reception in Nassau Coliseum.
That
and
was after your
tour from Desert Storm.
Yeah. Now, how long was that tour?
Well, that lasted about a month,
Oh,
only because the war ended faster than we thought. So,
but you were deployed then?
we were,
full intent of being in for a while.
well, yeah, once you get deployed from the president, it's could be up to 1 year.
I see. So after the month, were you then finished, or you went back in again, or how did?
Well, they were looking to send us out to different places, Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, and they pick who they want and the expertise on what they need there, and so it was about between me and somebody else was chosen to go there after the end of the war.
I see. So when did you finally get
Well,
separated from the service?
I got separated from the service back in June of 2000.
Okay. So from 90, when you went in for the month, was that in 90?
Yeah, and then when we came home, they had a ticker tape parade
Nice.
as a grand finale of a welcome home,
Nice.
which since I did public affairs.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, they chose me to coordinate the eastern seaboard of the ticker tape parade.
Well, that must have been full-time. How could you stayed in then longer?
No, it was just on your own time. A lot of the stuff was done on my own time.
Really?
I wasn't,
Oh.
everything I did
So you weren't
for
getting
the
paid
Navy.
at that point?
No, I'm doing it on my own time.
How, really?
Yeah.
How can they ask you to do that for free?
Well, they don't, you know.
That's a lot of work, ticker tape parade.
Yeah, well, I'm not the only one that did it. I had a lot of help.
Okay.
And I can't take the credit for the whole ticker tape parade. There's a lot of people that contributed
Yeah, sure,
to
sure,
the
sure.
completion of this thing.
But the fact that you weren't on duty, technically,
Yeah,
was
well,
pretty nice of you.
yeah. I enjoyed doing it, and they satisfied the.
When did you do that? You were working full-time for the?
I was working full-time, yeah. And I did it at my own leisure, and sometimes when I'm on drill duty, I would sit down with people to I would delegate to help me complete this
Oh, okay.
and see who wants to get involved.
What, you remember the year? What year was that? The parade?
Well, it was in I think it was 1992 when they had the parade.
Okay,
It was immediately after the war was over.
okay. Okay, so then, once you separated from the military in 2000, then were you still working for the airlines, or what did you do?
Actually, no. Because I was with the airlines from the 60s, and then actually I was doing I was in marketing and sales.
Okay, for the airlines?
No.
Oh.
No, when I left the airline.
Oh,
Yeah.
for another company.
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think are some life lessons you learned from the military?
Well, what really goes on and dealing with different individuals of different lifestyles,
Backgrounds and all?
backgrounds, and you became so attached to these people, even though it wasn't on a day-to-day basis. When you do it for a length of time, it's like they became your second family.
Nice, that's nice, yeah.
And
So everybody was looking out for each other.
yeah, it's just like a cop would say, my partner's got my back. And that's part of the military. If you don't have somebody else's back,
They won't have yours.
it won't have a happy ending.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so how do you think your military service impacted your feelings about the military in general and war in general?
Well, over the years, there's a lot of political statements that are made about military, but for the most part, everyone that I knew in all branches, nobody was regretful about going in the military, and they feel that if you don't have a good feeling for the military, and if it's not done, things have a negative effect on the country. And to not back the people in the military and say, well, you know, bring everybody home, it just doesn't happen in real life.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, even though the military is the military, the police have their job, the firemen have their job, and everybody's got to do what they have to do.
Keep the country safe and going.
Yeah. So I learned a lot in being there for that length of time, and of course, I always had the backing of my family and my wife, because they had to endure being alone while I was away.
Now, when did you get married in this whole mix?
Well, I was married before I went in the military.
You were?
I went in the military late in life. You can't go in past 40 years old, but they give you, they add on years to compensate. So bringing it to 40 years old, I think it had somewhere, the cutoff was like 40 years old.
So how old were you when you first started?
I'd have to do the math.
Yeah.
I went in 1990, and I was born in 1942.
Wow, so you were married in what year?
Not 1980, 1980.
1980 you
The
started.
war was 1990. So I was born in 42, and so when I went in 80...
You were already married and had children?
Because I
by
got
then?
married in 64.
Wow. So you had children by then?
Oh, yes. I had two grown... Well, not grown. Back in the 80s, they were, you know...
In college or?
Well, no, not in college. They were young teenagers.
Teenagers, so,
and,
wow.
You know, less than teenager.
Did either of them, they're older now, but I mean, did either of them serve in the military?
Well, my oldest son served in the Air Force
Really? Wow.
for a couple of months shy of 25 years.
Wow, nice. You think that's directly related to your experience?
Yes, I do.
Do you?
I do.
You must be very proud of him, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Was he stationed abroad at all?
Oh, he was all over the world. He traveled more than I did with the Air Force. So...
Wow, that's great. Thank you. That's amazing. What message would you like to leave for future generations who might hear this interview?
I think that a military background can straighten a lot of kids out that need to be straightened out. But you have a good range of experience you can get, and even when you leave, it gets you into a good job, and you can get college training there, and they pay for it, and you get medical. I mean, I get basically almost free medical from the VA.
That's wonderful.
And
That's great. So there are benefits, but there's sacrifices too. Your wife
oh
was
yeah,
home alone
there
with
are
the kids.
sacrifices, and
Yeah. But we appreciate that.
yeah.
Thank you. One last question. Did you, at any time, were you injured during your
Actually,
service?
it wasn't. I was injured, and both times it wasn't due to military activity.
Okay.
I actually was in the winter, and it was two different locations. I was in Lakehurst, and I was in Brooklyn, where I slipped on ice and I fell, and I was brought to the hospital in one location.
But
And
you were serving at that time?
I was serving, so it was during military time. It's just that it wasn't in combat.
Right.
It wasn't in an exercise. It was, I was going from point A to point B, and it was doing bad weather and icing where I fell on both occasions.
Wow. Were you okay? I mean,
Yeah, and then I did have an issue when I went to Spain. I was actually traveling and approved by my doctor to go on active duty, and I had a stent for kidney stones.
ooh,
So it was after almost 2 weeks that I got an attack after
oh my God. In Spain?
in Spain, where I was put in a Navy hospital
Wow.
and treated for that.
How long did you have to stay in? You remember?
Well, I was in the hospital just for maybe 3 or 4 days, maybe 5,
Wow.
and then sent home. And
Oh, then you were sent home?
yeah,
Okay, wow. Is there anything that we haven't discussed you might like to add, or?
well, there was another. I mean, I had another injury, but
While you were serving?
while I was serving,
Yeah.
and
Where was that? I mean, where were you, what place were you in?
I believe I was in New York, and I'm sorry, but I can't really recall.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. How about when you served the 2 weeks each time? Anything transpired that we haven't covered? Or when you were active?
Well,
rather?
I'm applying for disability from the VA for a couple of things, where the fall on the ice, and also tinnitus, which when we did training with hand grenades and in training, not real life, the noise is
Sure.
very. So I do get problems with ringing in my ears.
That's annoying, yeah.
So
Well, I hope they can help you with that. I don't know what, so, anything else that we haven't covered?
Well, there. I did some. We did a project which I was doing the public affairs end of it, where it was I think they call it the Megan thing. It was somewhere in Selden, where.
That's on Long Island.
Yeah, it was we built a house that was donated, and it was for women or young girls, teenagers, that it started with one particular girl that abused by her father. And it was one of the churches that got this thing started, and the Seabees were chosen to expand on this house.
Wow.
To house these young teenagers that got abused.
Wow, that's nice. That's
So
amazing.
I know we worked on that. It was very rewarding.
Sure. Wow. And were you able to see the house to
Oh, yeah.
completion?
Yeah, we have.
that's great.
There was a closing ceremony, and I was involved in that.
Very nice.
And
Wow, you've done a lot. Thanks, Tom, for your service. We really appreciate it, and all you've done for 20 years for the service. Thank you.
well, you're quite welcome, and it's well appreciative that they give us this opportunity to express our years.
Well, I personally, we feel as a library, everyone should know. You know, we should preserve what you've done and what you know. So that's why it's important, and we really appreciate you sharing it with us. Thank you.
Yeah.